Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. The world is living in days of war, and that's why we came to the north of Israel to show you Tel Megiddo, also known as Armageddon. We will see the archaeological excavations that are related to the battles that happened here in the past. And we will see how the wars that happened here in a distant past influenced the history of Israel and the history of the entire world to this day. So if you're ready, let's get started. What is Megiddo? Megiddo is a city that was built for war. Dozens of battles have taken place here from ancient times to the present day. Egyptians, Canaanites, Israelites, Midianites, Amalekites, Philistines, Hasmoneans, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Mamluks, Mongols, French, Ottomans, English, Australians, Germans, Arabs, and Israelis have fought and died here. But why exactly here? What is so special or so terrible about this piece of land that it has seen so much blood and wars throughout history? Let's find out together now. The land of Canaan is located at a strategic point. See here it. It connects Africa, Asia, and Europe. It connected the great empires of the ancient world, such as, for example, Egypt, Mesopotamia. But mainly, the major trade routes passed through here. And whoever controlled the trade routes controlled a large amount of wealth and also power. But why specifically Megiddo, where we are, is considered so special? Because the Via Maris, the most important trade route of all, passed through here. The Via Maris went up the coast and connected to the Jezreel Valley. And it's just a small stretch of land they could cross, called Wadi Ara. And right at this crossroads on this trade route is Armageddon, Megiddo. And that's why the kings of the ancient world coveted Megiddo. And those who managed to conquer it fortified and prepared it for battle. It was literally a city built for war. And now we are going to enter and get to know this important city together. The city was originally built almost on the flat. So imagine there was a city here that was destroyed in a war and another city built on top of it in exactly the same place. And this city was also destroyed. So city after city was built in the same place. And the level of the city kept rising. What we see here on our side are the remains of the destroyed cities of Megiddo. There are literally 26 layers of destruction and reconstruction and the archaeology that springs from the ground. Any place here where we stop and look, what we will find are dozens, hundreds, thousands of pieces of pottery. Look at this here. How amazing and an interesting thing is, if we look at this little piece of pottery and several others that I am also seeing, they are burned. This may indicate that it may be from the destruction of one of the many destructions of Megiddo. that the city was destroyed and then burned. We are now going to return the archaeology to its rightful place, and we are now going to start climbing this mountain. A mountain of archaeological destruction remains. We will see the 26 different layers, and each layer from a different historical period. So we are now going to together take a journey through time and through the wars of Canaan and Israel. You have no idea. To any side here that I look, we see archaeology sprouting from the ground. So imagine 26 cities existed in this place. And an example, look here, who can understand what this is? This here is a jar from the ancient period, and this is the beginning of the handle, meaning we are literally holding a jar from an ancient period. This jar is at least 2,400 years old, and the oldest it could be is around 4,000 years. So, of course, we will return it to the same place we found it. But where we walk here, archaeology sprouts from the ground. Impressive. As we said, this place is known as Tel Megiddo. Another name for the place is Armageddon, which means a mound of Megiddo, precisely this artificial mound. And Armageddon is the Greek way of saying Armageddon. And I imagine that many of you know this place by that name. Archaeologists believe that Megiddo was founded approximately 7,000 years ago. And behind us, we see some of the oldest buildings found in archaeological excavations. Among them, the Great Temple, a Canaanite ring temple of at least 4,300 years old, and it was 22 by 154 feet long. And we see here next to us the great circular altar of this temple. And next to the altar were corridors filled up to the waist with bones that were sacrificed in this place. But it's important to note that all the bones found in this place were animal bones. We know that the Canaanites did perform human sacrifices, but we found out that they were not done here, but in other places in the land of Canaan. The archaeological excavations here began in 1903 by a German researcher named Gottlieb Schumacher. And he excavated here for years and made detailed research and notes with everything he found. And he took all this research back to Germany, his home country. However, before he could publish to the whole world what was found at this site, World War I began, and with the bombings and destructions of the war in Germany, most of these notes simply disappeared, and thus most of the findings found here in the first archaeological excavations were never published, and we don't really know most of what was found here. And finally, in 1925, the archaeological excavations are resumed, but a few years later, they are interrupted again, this time due to the start of World War II, and most of what was found in this second excavation was also not published, and what was published only decades later. See how wars, even wars that happened outside of this region, like World War I and World War II, influenced the history and archaeology and the archaeological excavations of this place. And because of this, Most of what was found in the first and second archaeological excavation of Megiddo remains a mystery and a secret to this day. We said the city was built for war, and now we are going to walk together and see these military constructions. When we think of military protection in ancient times, what probably comes to most people's minds are walls. And of course, here in Megiddo, throughout history, there were many walls that were used for the protection of the city. We know that King David conquered many territories here in the region, so after him, King Solomon had to consolidate his power, and the Bible tells us that he will fortify and build walls among them here in Megiddo. The reason why Solomon imposed the tribute is this: to build the house of the Lord, his own palace, the fortress of Milo and the wall of Jerusalem, as well as Hatzor, Megiddo, and Gezer. And an impressive thing that happened is that in the archaeological excavations of these three cities, the walls and gates were found. We can see that these three gates are very similar. Obviously, they are from the same era, but they follow the same architectural model and even have the same dimensions. And that's why we believe they were actually built by the same architects. Probably the architects of King Solomon. And here beside us now is this great gate, the gate of Megiddo, built by King Solomon. Let's go in and learn more. The gate was always the most vulnerable point of every wall, and therefore its security needed to be reinforced, as it was literally a breach to enter the city. Here we see that at the entrance there were two large protection towers, and those who entered here in ancient times encountered great protection. In addition to the towers, on the sides there are 6 rooms, 3 on each side. And inside each of these rooms, what do you think they had? Here they had soldiers ready to go to war at any moment they needed. And besides soldiers, there were also government officials here, people who worked for the king and could be his eyes in this very sensitive and delicate place. But how can we know that this gate was really built by King Solomon? Carbon-14 tests, which is a test that takes organic materials and finds out the dating, a test done in 2020 by Hendrik J. Bruins proves that this gate was really built during the time of the unified monarchy, which is precisely the time of King Solomon. We talk a lot about the city's defense, but how were the attacks carried out? How did the city fight its enemies? Now we are going to see the cavalry and the army of the city of Megiddo, so come with me. Great walls, sophisticated gates were useless if the city did not have a large army and an army prepared with the best technology of the time. And what was best in the army 3,000 years ago was a large cavalry. Look at this here, what we have here. Obviously, this is not from the time, but this place was built to remind us of the great cavalry that was part of the Megiddo army. They built 2 stables here. We're about to enter one of them. But imagine that in total, there were between 450 and 480 horses here. If there are hundreds of horses, imagine how many soldiers came here to fight on them. also fight in chariots and carriages and also, of course, fight on foot. I imagine it must have been a terrifying scene for the enemy armies that came to invade Megiddo and arrived here and were confronted with hundreds and hundreds of horses prepared for war and thousands of other soldiers. So really, this showed that the city was prepared 24 hours a day for a future great battle. And now we're going to delve into the archaeology of the stables and cavalry of ancient Megiddo. Let's go. This is the entrance to the South Stable, and there's a debate among archaeologists about who really built this place, whether it was King Solomon or King Ahab. I mean, this stable has between 2,800 and 3,000 years of history. But despite so much time having passed, we can see some of the original mangers here. So the horses were tied up here and they could use this place to eat or drink water. See that Megiddo is completely abandoned and destroyed. No one has lived up here for a long time. But looking back, we can clearly see a small town that was founded next to it. So no one lives in biblical Megiddo, but next to it there are some people who live in the valley of Armageddon. Imagine that. In ancient wars, cities were often besieged. This means that the city was completely surrounded and no one could enter or leave it. Sometimes these sieges could last weeks, if not months. And we have ancient records of sieges that lasted years. So the city needed to be prepared at any moment for a possible siege. And that's why inside the city they needed to store a large amount of water and food. And look exactly what was found in the archaeological excavations. This here is a gigantic silo, a grain storage. This grain storage is 36 feet wide and 23 feet deep. It could hold up to 450 cubic meters of grain, mainly wheat that was produced here around in the Jezreel Valley. And this silo, it was probably built by King Jeroboam II in the 8th century BC. And we can see its construction with stairs that go down on both sides for easier access to it. And where did the city of Megiddo get water? Outside the walls, there was a spring. But is it a problem for the water source to be outside? First, because on a daily basis, it would be very tiring for the city's population to have to leave the walls and come in carrying these heavy jars full of water, especially for the women who in the ancient world usually had the role of bringing water to their families. And the second and main reason is that in a period of siege warfare, the enemies who are outside would have all the access to the water and the people inside the city would die of thirst. And that's why in ancient times, a fascinating structure was built here. Here, one of the largest water systems of the ancient world was built. Look at this. This is a great construction. They start here a tunnel that is 118 feet deep. And then the continuation of the tunnel is another 76.554 yards long, and it reached up to the spring. You can see here on the side, come with me, that this is the entrance to this water system. But as you can also see, it is written on the sign here that entry is prohibited. Since the beginning of this year, they have banned entry to the Armageddon underground. But don't worry, we are going to put on the screen for you now the images we took here 3 years ago, when we could still enter this place. And with these images, you can get a better idea, really, of the colossal size of this water system. And after they finish building it, they close the exit to the outside of the walls. So those who were outside the walls, the enemies, would not have access to water. And on the other hand, the population that was here inside would have access, I won't say easy, but facilitated to the water source, which was the source of life of Armageddon. Wow, a windstorm has started now, but are we going to continue telling the story of this city? Because despite all the preparations and constructions they made, nothing could save this city. No one is sure exactly how, when, and why Megiddo was destroyed for the last time. But probably at the end of the Persian period, the city of Megiddo was completely abandoned and never rebuilt. This around the year 350 BC. And since then, for almost 2,400 years, the city has been this way, completely in ruins. But even with the city destroyed and abandoned, this place did not lose its strategic and military importance. And that's why battles continue to happen here and in the valley until modern times. And to talk about the wars of the present and the future, let's now go to Admiral. When the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation in the 1st century after Christ, the city of Armageddon had already been destroyed many centuries ago. So how can he say that here in Megiddo the great final battle will begin? How can a battle happen if the place no longer existed? When he writes in the book of Revelation 16:16 about the beginning of the great battle in Armageddon, he is not referring to the archaeological site, to the mountain where we are now, but rather he is referring to the great battle that will begin in the valley of Armageddon, the valley that is around us here. And malignant and painful sores appeared on the people who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood like that of a dead person, and every living thing in the sea died. The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast. The kingdom of the beast was plunged into darkness, and people gnawed their tongues in agony. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates. The waters of the river were dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Then the kings were gathered together in the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning, voices, and thunders, and there was a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. Such was the great and mighty earthquake. So don't miss next Sunday, as we will enter the Valley of Armageddon together to learn about the battles that have taken place here in the past, present, but especially in the future. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you here next week. A kiss, and until next time.